Hey guys, I was gonna show you a bit of the English countryside today, but it's raining as expected, I guess. So we're here in the barn talking about sex, because why not? If you want to know what sex is supposed to look like, all you have to do really is just take porn and then flip that upside down. Because porn is a complete inversion of what sex is supposed to be. It's a bit like when you have Christ, you have the Antichrist, right? Well, in the same way, there's sex and there's anti-sex, which is porn. And even though I turned my back on porn many years ago, it would still take me roughly 15 years of studying and learning and teaching even about sacred sexuality to come to fully understand the full picture of what sex is. And because we don't just want good sex, right? Maybe not even great sex. What about godly sex? What about sex that edifies us, that heals us, and that liberates us from sexual slavery? And what does good sex even mean? Does it mean maximizing your pleasure? Does it mean maximizing her pleasure, perhaps? What about the Kama Sutra? What about becoming multi-orgasmic, like Mantak Chia talks in his book? Now, of course, porn doesn't fit the bill for any of these things, right? But it's not always because we are clear what we're saying no to that we're also clear what we're saying yes to, especially because the body carries a memory and is often programmed to have sex in a certain way. And so there's usually still a gap between where we are and where we want to be. For example, maybe it's still hard for you to get out of your head and into your body. Perhaps foreplay feels very boring because you're so focused on the climax. Or perhaps you feel physically connected, but the heart is still closed and it's hard to establish an emotional connection even if you want to. And these are all signs of a disconnect between the body, the soul, and the spirit, especially because we have been programming the body for so many years and using it as an instrument for our own gratification. And it's this exact gap that Neo-Tantra tries to fill with all these embodiment practices. And while it gets a lot of things right, it also gets a lot of things wrong, which I'll explain in a moment. And what helped me a lot in starting to bridge that gap between where I was and where I wanted to be was the practice of semen retention, because I had to learn how to control the impulse to ejaculate, which then forces the sexual energy to integrate more deeply into the body. And in that process, it becomes more refined. I don't know why I feel like I'm whispering. Maybe I don't want to upset the cows or something. And secondly, also, especially if you do longer periods of semen retention, you have to learn how to move from your head into your body, because you can't be in control of the body unless you're in it. I know that sounds kind of obvious, but many of us, we live in our head instead of our body. And so there is often this disconnect. Kind of like when you want to drive a car, you have to be obviously in the car. And combined with learning about breath control, which to help you regulate the nervous system, this then starts adding a whole other dimension to sex. And because of this, because you're no longer a slave to your impulses, you can start shaping the sexual experience into something that not only satisfies the body, but also satisfies the soul. And all of this combined becomes a beautiful gift you can share with your woman, because now you have the capacity to bring more presence and to bring more attention to her experience and her pleasure, because you know how to slow down, you know how to tune in, and you know how to sync up your bodies and sync up your energies to feel the rhythm. And now sex can actually start telling a story. And this is where the deeper satisfaction also comes from for men. It doesn't come from our own pleasure, it comes from her pleasure and our capacity to give her that, because we are extremely wired to give and be of service to our woman. So there is a lot to learn from Tantra if you want to know how to have good sex. But there is something even better than good sex, which is godly sex. And I remember one night in Bali many years ago, I was assisting temple night, and we were doing all the exercises for embodiment and for connection and cultivating intimacy. And at some point we were asked to bow down to the feet of the women to honor the goddess, so to speak. And it was in that moment he knew he fucked up. But it really made me question, like, what is this all for? It's one thing to learn how to have sex and to learn how to set boundaries, how to communicate your desires, how to overcome shame. But the question remained, why? And it's this question then that, first of all, got me actually deeper into Tantra, because I knew Neo-Tantra was kind of like a westernized, aka sexualized version of Tantra. So I went deeper into classical Tantra, only to shortly after abandon it altogether once I found out what it was all about. And the goal of Tantra is to realize your own divinity, and there is indeed a lot of goddess worship involved. And so in the end, it is still self-serving, and it's a very performative kind of devotion, almost like, in my opinion, like a sophisticated version of porn. And where sex gets reduced to just a technique, and she just gets reduced to an instrument to your own awakening, which means she's replaceable, because all the women are goddesses. Especially if you date a new woman every month, they're all going to appear like being a goddess, right? If you're constantly in the honeymoon phase. But the thing is, I don't want a goddess. I want a wife. And I don't want to be God. I want to be a husband who loves his wife and who honors God through her. And so while there is medicine to be found in some of these practices, the reality is that you still might be operating in lust and not love. And the way to find this out is very simple. It's to simply pay really close attention to what happens after you climax, once the biological need disappears. Do you want to just roll over and disappear, or do you want to stay close and connect? That is lust versus love. And I myself had been hiding from this simple truth for many years because of the semen retention. What was once a medicine for me became a way to hide from this deeper truth, the truth that I was still operating in lust and not love. And the power of sex is not in how, but in why we do it. And healing doesn't come from a technique or a practice. It comes from alignment. It comes from the structure of the Trinity of man, woman, and God, with God being the unifying principle that transcends romantic love, eros, into agape love. And in that process, we get edified, not to become God, but to learn how to love our woman the way God loves her. And so Tantra gets it right in the sense that it shows us how to honor the body and how to honor our wife, but then completely misses the mark by directing our worship in the wrong direction. Most sexual problems are actually problems of the self, things like shame, addiction, performance anxiety. And so for this reason, it makes sense to move from the head into the body and then shift our attention away from the self towards her and to be in service of her. But it's a huge mistake to burden our woman and even ourselves with that task of transcending our sexual trauma. That is God's job. And if you understand this, you will invite deep healing into your relationship. And that's what I'm here to show you. There is great healing in standing naked before your woman, not just physically, but also mentally, emotionally. But there's even greater healing in standing naked, so to speak, before God together. And you'll see if you do this that it will become much harder to operate in lust, because you can fool yourself for a while, but you cannot fool the all-knowing. Now, please don't overthink this. I'm actually pointing towards more simplicity, not less, and to see if you can move beyond the techniques and the practices, and to simply trust the design. The power is in the structure, the power of the Trinity. And each time you have sex, you strengthen that structure, and grace just takes care of the rest. And so our only job is actually to just give ourselves full-heartedly to each other, saying, this is my body. And that is the mantra of godly sex. Sex is either a sacrament to Satan or a prayer to God. Guys, thanks for watching. The links are down below, and I'll see you next week.